Thank you all for being here. We are here today to talk about what you might call a case involving illegal possession, sales, activity around guns, but it's really a lot deeper than that. It is not my practice to ask someone to come forward at the very beginning and speak in general, but it is today. This gun connects to something awful. Senator Street.
Today I'm here. I've stood here at press events in this space many times, but usually it's simply just a public official. Today I'm here because my understanding is that the defendant's gun, some of the guns were trafficked. At least one of those guns was used in the mass shooting on July 4th of 2021, in which Lala was killed. Most of you know Lala. My wife and I lost our nephew in 2021 in a mass shooting, and some of the guns trafficked in this space trace back to Lala's shooting. For me, it's sort of the intersection of what we always talk about around the need to go after straw purchasers, the need to have more legislation around reporting of lost and stolen guns, the need to deal with the purchaser issue. Look, the folks who pulled the trigger were caught some time ago and have been prosecuted, but the level of sophistication for at least the primary shooter was a guy who's so unsophisticated. I mean, such a fool that he actually posted himself, bragging about it on social media. But the level of culpability as a society we have for people who then go in the business of selling guns to people like this, and we as a society who make it so easy for them to do it, and is also a troubling thing, because the reality is a bunch of stupid, angry, homicidal acting young people, if they were carrying baseball bats, probably do a lot less damage than with military-grade weapons. And so I'm glad the District Attorney's Office and all those in the police department, all those involved, followed up. But stopping a person trafficking firearms is incredibly important. And for me, it's sort of a weird space to be here, both talking about an issue that I've talked about so often and so frequently, but now talking about it from the perspective of literally the failures of the system in this regard, allowing folks to be straw purchasers and purchase guns for someone else, literally led into a mass shooting. When I think about talking with Lala's mom, and she used to worry because he drove a tow truck, about him getting shot on some tow in the middle of the night, but he owned a tow truck. It wasn't that. It was 4th of July, broad daylight, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and 4th of July cookout is not the thing that you think about as a parent, worry about your child getting shot at. But I heard one statistic quoted something like 843,000 guns were sold in Pennsylvania legally. 17,000 were taken off the streets by police and law enforcement. That's more than half of which were in Philadelphia. 17,000 guns is a lot of guns to take off the street, but if you're going to pump 843,000 into the system, some of those are going to be sold into the illegal market, and when it happens, these are the kind of tragedies you get. So, look, on behalf of the family, I want to thank law enforcement for continuing to follow this case beyond the shooter, but tracing the guns, making sure that this doesn't happen to others. And as a policymaker, look, we've got to do better. I said to my colleagues in the Senate in particular, where we haven't moved all kinds of pieces of gun legislation. We need to move some of those bills that the House has moved. Or agree on something. At a minimum, reporting of lost and stolen handguns seems a reasonable one, but there are red flag laws. There's so many things we haven't done. We have to improve the legislative regime that exists around availability of firearms. And again, just want to thank everyone in law enforcement and the district attorney who are involved in tracing this gun, but this and to this straw purchaser. But this is indicative of a huge problem, and it's sort of surreal because here we are again talking about this 4 years later, almost 4 years later, 3.5 years later, and still talking about Lala's murder and the mass shooting. But 105 shots fired on the 4th of July at a cookout into a crowd. It is the only miracle is that only 2 people were killed, because it certainly could have been many more. Unfortunately, there's a family behind each and every murder, and in this case, in one of them, is our family. So with that, I will yield back to the district attorney.
Thank you, Senator. I will get into some comments that I have in a moment, but I think it's important to bring forward Bill Fritzie, head of the Gun Violence Task Force, to speak on behalf of the prosecutor who actually handled this case to the guilty plea that has just been entered. That attorney is Jeff Palmer, whom you have seen many times before. He's in the middle of a jury trial right now, because that's the way it actually works around here. People don't just show up for press conferences. That's their side job. Their day job is going to court and prosecuting homicide cases, doing it vigorously with skill, with talent, and obtaining the just result in those cases. But I want you to hear more about this case from Mr. Fritzie, who's done great work, along with Mr. Palmer, along with the homicide unit in this regard, before I give you a few more comments. Mr. Fritzie.
Good morning, everyone. In 2021, there was an uptick in violence in West Philadelphia, and Gun Violence Task Force was asked by our partners at the Philadelphia Police Department, in particular Inspector Matthew Gillespie, to help in what we could to decrease the violence in the area. This was truly a team effort. Not only was PPD able to provide us 2 detectives, Detective John Brady and Detective David Ganone, but they were also Gun Violence Task Force, through the Office of Attorney General, was able to provide us agents, not only with the Gun Violence Task Force, but with BNI, the Bureau of Narcotics Investigations, over at the Office of Attorney General. And what that enforcement action allowed us to do was really focus on real-time incidents and recover valuable information, but also be able to look back at what had been happening to determine who was doing the shootings and where they were getting their guns from. As a result, Calvin Gatewood was arrested for his role in the transfer of 4 firearms to 0 to the 4 members, Anthony Woodson, and an additional firearm transfer to 2 other males. Gatewood pled guilty to those offenses on March 7th of this year before the Honorable Judge O'Keefe, and he'll be sentenced on May 8th for the following conduct. Anthony Woodson, who was 17 at the time and unable to purchase firearms due to his age, went with Gatewood to the Bunker Gun Shop in Warminster, PA, on August 29th, 2020. At that time, Gatewood purchased an FN Herstal, Herstal, FNB 509 9mm handgun and a Springfield model XDM M9 9mm. The Herstal was later used in a non-fatal shooting which took place on the 3800 block of Parish Street on January 16th of 2021. Woodson has pled guilty to that shooting. This firearm was recovered from Woodson's residence by the Philadelphia Police Department and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office on August 4th of 2021. Gatewood transferred the Springfield 9mm in conjunction with Woodson and an additional 0 to 4 member, Nasir Wells, to 2 individuals who used it in an attempted carjacking in Ballackinwood in December of 2020. On September 26th of 2020, Woodson accompanied Gatewood to Tanner's Sports Center in Jameson, PA, where Gatewood purchased a Glock 17 9mm and a Glock 22 40 caliber at Woodson's direction. Woodson later removed that serial number from the Glock 22. Why would he do that? That's to make it harder for law enforcement to trace that back later. On October 2nd of 2021, Woodson accompanied Gatewood to Clayton's range in Horsham, PA, where he later purchased a Glock Model 21 45 caliber handgun for Woodson. This gun was later used in 2 separate shootings, which Woodson, again, has pled guilty to. Both occurred on July 4th of 2021. The first is a non-fatal shooting, the 600 block of Walton Avenue. The second is the double homicide that happened later at 149 South 60th Street during a 4th of July block party where 2 people were fatally shot and a third was shot but thankfully survived. His firearm was also recovered at Woodson's residence on August 4th of 2021. As you can see, when we see straw purchasers, many times they go out of county, out of Philadelphia County, and then bring their guns back into Philadelphia, where they're then traded and provided to people on the street. Many times when we have these press conferences, we focus on the gang members who are doing the shootings. It's important to remember that the people supplying the guns to these teenagers are just as vile as the people who pull the trigger. There's no difference between a straw purchaser handing a gun over to a violent gang member than there is between a drug dealer handing a needle over to a user. In this case, Gatewood knew exactly what was happening with the guns he was supplying. And there was no person coercing him to buy these guns and put them in the hands of gang members. I'd like to thank the Office of Attorney General and the Philadelphia Police Department for their continued partnership with the Gun Violence Task Force. As a special thank you to Assistant District Attorney Jeff Palmer, who worked tirelessly with the investigators from the very beginning and secured these convictions. With their help, we'll work and continue to work side by side to get the guns off the street and hold those accountable who distribute them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Just a few comments, and then we'll go to question and answer. Number one, does the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office prosecute gun possession cases? Obviously. Number two, are we serious about it? Are we serious about it? When I stood up here and said, "Oh, to the 4, go to the jail," quite some time ago, we were not done. And we've shown this time and time again. We were not done. We wanted to know where the guns came from, who supplied them, how this happened. We wanted to take this investigation as far as it could be taken to try to uproot the problem and go as deep as we could go, and that's what we did. And frankly, that's what we always do when we have the opportunity, the resources, and the good partners that we have to do this. But I'm not feeling like being too quiet today, because sometimes there are things you got to say. Modern Germany has 11% of our homicide rate, and it has 11% of our rate of incarceration. Why? Well, one of the main reasons is they're smart about access to firearms. I do not face a Republican opponent in the election. So in making comments about Republicans, I am not doing so for any political benefit in my election, nor do I consider it to be political. But there's something else you need to know, because it's real. I actually checked on this because I was shocked. In the middle of the pandemic, there was a criminological study that came out and said the homicide rate was 40% higher in Republican states. This caught my attention because, as you may know, polling in the United States tends to indicate that people somehow have this notion that Republican electeds do better with crime. Well, you know, pandemics are special times, so I went to the trouble because I understand that what a Republican state really is it's a collection of policies. It's a collection of laws. It's a collection of beliefs that are fundamental about things like having a social safety net, or whether we're going to preserve Social Security, or access to guns. So I went to the trouble of checking to see whether that was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, or that's some kind of a pattern. Why? Because I wanted to see what happens in the United States in this era when you provide all kinds of access to guns, something that even Republicans didn't used to support the way that many of them support it now, okay? And what did I find? I found that in the last 25 years, if you categorize states by how they voted in the last presidential, whether it was for a Republican president or a Democratic president, in the last 25 years, you were in more danger of being murdered in a Republican state 24 of those 25 years. How much more? Well, if we take all 25 years, including the only 1 year when you were safer in a Republican state, we find that for 25 years, where there were 100 homicide victims in a Democratic state, there were 133 in a Republican state. So let me get this straight. You need more and more guns in Republican states to make you safe? Your policy set consists of ready access to guns, tuck a gun into every diaper, run around wearing a lapel pin with an AR-15 design. Let's not fund public education. And you got 33 people killed who didn't have to be killed? And you've been doing this for 25 years? And somehow the American public is trusting you with public safety? Look, this is not about vilifying people who have a particular political belief. This is just about shining some light on the truth. Here's the truth. Canada had something like 300 homicides last year. They were mostly by knife. How many did the United States have? There is no reason why the United States cannot have better gun regulations, common sense gun regulations. The statistic the senator was quoting was from 2023. It's the last available information that we have. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you had something along the lines of 850,000 guns sold in gun shops in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And through all of the efforts of law enforcement in the entire state, they only took back 17,000. So we have 70,000 new guns in circulation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania every month. Let's break it down by day. 2,300 new guns, let me try that again, 70,000 a month, 2,300 new guns in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania every day. Every day. We got New York mad at us because we supply their guns. We got New Jersey mad at us because we supply their guns. And they should be mad at us. And we expect our police somehow to solve this when 800 plus thousand new ones are out there by picking up 17,000. We expect that to solve this? This defendant has no excuse. This defendant, Calvin Gatewood, is going to be held strictly accountable. He deserves every day he gets in jail, and he's going to get a lot of them. But that does not mean that there is no responsibility on the part of legislators who are doing a mental math that is political and does not take into account the loss of life, the bloodshed, the harm to communities. I know that there are reasonable people in both parties who want safety. They might disagree on other issues, but they want safety. And it ain't that hard. All you have to do is listen to him. Listen to Senator Street when he's not just talking about what needs to be done from the perspective of an expert in legislation, but he's talking about what needs to be done because of Lala, Salyuddin Mahmood, the victim of the shooting. Small business owner, 21. Not in the game, at a cookout. I hope every Pennsylvania legislator who's walking around with an AR-15 pin, I hope every legislator, I don't care what party you're from, who's walking around hollering, more guns make us safe, I hope you look in the mirror, and I hope you admit the truth, which is that you're bought and sold by the NRA. And there is probably no organization in the history of the United States that has done more to promote violent crime than the National Rifle Association. Get away from them. Money in your pocket for your campaign does not justify the blood on your hands. And that's the truth. Now, having said all of that, the work that was done on this case is absolutely fabulous by our law enforcement partners, by people in this office, including Jeff Palmer, including Bill Fritzy. It is such a model of how things should be done that we have already moved, because of this case and several others, in the direction of having our gun violence task force, our homicide non-fatal shooting unit, and even some of the attorneys in our majors unit working in very close collaboration, because the forensics, the deep dive investigations, the quality of this work can help us with all gun violence issues, all illegal gun trade issues, all shootings, all homicides by gun. It all works together beautifully. But we need some help here, folks, elected officials. I'm one of you. We need some help. We need some of you to show some courage and stand up and say that we are not going to tolerate being the unruly child who is allowing guns to flow through here to New York, to New Jersey. Of the 17,000 guns taken off the street in 2023, about 40% of them were taken off the street in Philly. We're doing what we're supposed to do here. And the longest sentences for gun possession, according to the House of Representatives for Pennsylvania, the longest sentences for gun possession are coming out of Philly. That's their study, not mine. It's not enough. Get the NRA money out of your pocket. Think about your constituents. Stand up for their safety. We're only talking about common sense gun regulation. You have less regulation on guns than you do on cars. And frankly, you should be ashamed of yourselves for that. But that doesn't mean there's no path forward. You have a path forward. We should all be together on wanting more safety and more freedom. We should all be together on that. And frankly, it just doesn't even take all that much courage to do the right thing. Are there any questions? Let me start with Bill Siders, 3 CBS. Thank you. All right, I know that 6ABC, I have a note here, 6ABC is here, but I'm not sure exactly who. Any questions? Thank you. Let me see, we are at Mr. Cole, 29 Fox.
Do you have any sense whether these gun stores, has anybody moved on them? Did they have any knowledge? Sometimes gun stores do. They recognize that this is a straw purchase that's happening in front of them. Did they have any culpability here? Did they know this was happening? Has anybody moved on the gun stores?
Thank you for the question. Let me check with a couple people and we'll see if we can answer that.
Sure.
So as far as gun stores are concerned, the task force agents in particular, and within law enforcement in general, most of us have a good relationship with those stores. They are required under federal guidelines to keep an eye out, right, if they see something suspicious. A lot of times, and what we saw in this case, is someone's buying maybe just 1 or 2 guns, right, and they leave. So there has to be some flags that the gun store owners would necessarily see. Maybe someone fills out a form that says, no, I won't be the owner of the gun. Well, that's a pretty big flag right there. Or, you know, someone's trading money with somebody else within the store. So the criminal element is very good at being able to kind of trick the store owners, or at least hide the fact that it's going to be a straw purchase. But it doesn't mean that they're not involved in keeping an eye out, because they also have to keep their standards up, and they have to, because they are regulated by the federal government as well. So we have a fairly good relationship with most gun stores.
Do you know, was the young kid, was he in there with the straw?
So I think by the time, and I can't be certain because I was not the one who did the investigation, but usually by the time that we go back, unless they have cameras and those cameras have caught them and are holding that information for several years, mostly what we have is just paperwork, handwritten paperwork showing who the owner of the purchase paperwork was for the owner.
Right. Sometimes I've seen investigators ask the gun shop, did you see two people? Were they conversing? Was somebody pointing out the weapon? Often gives away that it's a straw.
Correct.
Not that you know that this happened in this case.
Not that I know that this happened in this case, right?
Okay.
Senator?
Look, I think you make an excellent point. I think there needs to be, and I think some of my colleagues, and at the moment I'm probably not as clear-headed as normal about legislation, but I believe there's legislation pending. Some of my Democratic colleagues have introduced that would create greater accountability for what the stores have to do. Certainly, Senator Haywood's legislation around registration that's similar to cars would create a more extensive process where you could sort of trace the activity that happens with the stores. Look, there are things we can do. We can, I don't want to pretend that there aren't legislative solutions for this. There are really questions, is there political will to enact any of it? So I think it's a great point you raise. I don't know that the stores would be uncooperative in those acts. They do what's required of them, and in Pennsylvania, that's not much.
Right. I did want to ask you, though,
Sure.
I mean, it has been the state Senate, frankly, that's been the obstacle to gun reform
Absolutely.
legislation. Bills have come out of the House.
Yeah.
It's the Senate where you can't move it.
No, you're 100% right. It is the Senate. The Senate Republican leadership that's in the majority doesn't want to call votes. I believe if you call votes on many of these bills, there are 26 senators that will vote on it. But yeah, that requires a vote. And let me explain for people watching. The Senate has majority. Republicans have a rule of majority, which means if they don't get a majority of the Republican caucus to support something, they won't call it to a vote, even if they're a majority of the Senate. So let's say you have 10 Republican senators who would be willing to vote for a piece of legislation and all of the Democrats. Well, that's a pretty clear majority. It's 32 members out of a 50-person body, but that never sees a vote because those 10 Republicans don't represent more than half of their caucus. You can't get 15 Republicans supporting something, you don't get a vote. And so it's not that there aren't necessarily votes in the building, but if you have a leadership on a majority caucus that won't call it for a vote, then we can't get it. We haven't had a vote on a gun bill since I've been there in 9 years.
So you don't see, despite what the DA has said, that there needs to be this reform and legislators need to sort of
I
wipe
agree.
the blood. You don't think there will be a vote? You don't see that it's any better now in the state Senate than it was?
I don't think that I think that if there were a vote, it would pass. I don't think that the Senate Republican leadership is about to call a vote on any of these bills, but it is a tragedy. And one of the things I want to point out is that for the so-called moderate Republicans that would vote for it, they've got to push their leadership to say, look, call a vote on the bills. Let's actually have a vote. Bills have come out of the House. These votes that came out the House, by the way, are not like earth-shatteringly. They don't turn us into a progressive state. They turn us into we'd still be the most regressive state on gun laws. We would just be a little less regressive than we currently are, because we are so much more regressive than everybody around us. One Bloomberg study said that 85% of the guns used in crimes in New York City were purchased in Pennsylvania. The majority of guns used in New Jersey. We're the source state for everything, but it's also the guns, we're the sources of guns coming in to Pennsylvania. They're not. They're just purchased legally here and sold illegally, and we need to do something about it. And look, when you talk to law-abiding gun owners, I never heard a law-abiding gun owner who was worried about having to report their gun lost or stolen. I never heard them worrying about a gun store having to, do a little bit more about straw purchasers. And so this is not one gun a month we're talking about. We're restricting how many guns people can have. This is not banning weapons. By the way, I would vote for almost all those things. But I'm not talking about that right now. We're talking about very reasonable things to give law enforcement the tools to stop gun traffickers from trafficking guns to the most irresponsible, reckless, dangerous people possible. Because, listen, crazy, stupid, violent young people exist everywhere in the world. It's just here they have military-grade weapons. And by the way, the last thing, this whole idea that guns, people with the good guy with the gun thing, is ridiculous. In Lala's case, there were cops on the scene, but they fired over, I'm told, over 100, and I don't even know the exact number, but well over 100 shots in less than 2 minutes. Now, if you're a police officer standing in this room, and you're standing in the corner by the door here, and one of you in the audience had an automatic weapon and started firing weapons, the person, unless you got like Usain Bolt as the police officer, they're not going to be able to physically move fast enough to stop people from getting shot in when you can fire 100 bullets in 2 minutes. And so the good guy with a gun doesn't work when the bad guys can fire hundreds of shots in minutes. And catching people is great. We want to catch bad guys. We want to catch people who do this. But it doesn't bring anybody back, right? A lot of us killers been caught. Even the gun traffickers now been caught, but he's still dead. And the other young man is dead. And all the people who were killed with all the guns that this guy sold are dead. And dead people don't come back in this lifetime. And I'm obviously believes in people maybe in another life, in another way, but in this life, when people are killed, they're killed. And catching the bad guys stops other people from dying, but it doesn't bring people back. And so, but stopping gun traffickers stops people from dying. And there's a difference. And every time we talk about this, my colleagues will say we need to have greater penalties on the back end. But that doesn't bring anyone back. But doing this actually keeps people alive. It just doesn't punish people after people are dead.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Fritzie. I understand Univision. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Let me keep moving here. Mr. Cole?
I do.
You got another one?
I do. So you said, hey, I don't have a Republican opponent. You do have a Democratic opponent. Has that Democratic opponent, in your view, unfairly accused you of not prosecuting gun cases?
Now, that is political, because I do have a Democratic opponent, and therefore, for ethical reasons that are specified by the city, I can't comment on it right here.
Got it.
But thank you, Mr. Cole. All right, Sherry Stone, Philadelphia Tribune.
No. I wasn't there. So the relationship, in the black community, we refer to my nephew. He was my wife's first cousin's son. And in the hood, he called me Uncle Sharif. I referred to him as my nephew, but he was actually my wife's first cousin's son. I wasn't at the barbecue. I would have preferred to be at the barbecue that day, although in retrospect, glad I wasn't. My wife wanted us to go to the 4th of July to the Atlantic City, to the beach. I'm probably disclosing a lot more about me. I'm not really a sit in the sun on the beach kind of guy, but I am a dutiful husband when required to go in order to have fun on the beach. So I was sitting on the beach, probably looking at my phone trying to work, which is also says something about me. But no, I wasn't there because we were at the beach. Like I said, I like Philadelphia cookouts in the street. That's what I like to do. My wife likes to go to the beach. So we went to the beach. I lost that argument. But had I won and we stayed in the city, my sons probably would have been, who hung out with Lala, probably would have been there with him. At least 2 of my 3 sons probably would have been there. They weren't, because their mom made them go to the beach. which I don't think they wanted to go either. But in this case, we had less tragedy because my wife insisted that we go to the beach on the 4th of July. It was a tradition that she had upheld for some time. All right. All right. Yeah.
Just one more reason to listen to your partner. All right, anything else, Ms. Stone? Okay. Metro, Jack Tomchuk. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Okay.
As for Mr. Woodson, we have an idea of what is here, what is he doing? I mean, was he friends with the young man who he was getting guns for?
Bill? Gotta get to the mic.
So, and I can't speak specifically to this because this was not my actual investigation, but what was going on at that time, Oda the Four was making its name in the neighborhood. There were back and forth issues over Instagram, slights being made, and a lot of that was then these individuals like Mr. Woodson targeting people who they disagreed with, their opposition. Not to say that the people, not every person who was murdered or every person that was shot, right? If you're shooting into a crowd of people, you're not necessarily associated, but they knew people were there that they wanted to target that day.
I think I used the wrong name. I'm sorry. The guy who was buying the guns.
Oh.
Was he doing that for money or because he was friends with the teenager?
I think it was a combination, but obviously he was making some money off of those
Do
things.
you have any idea how much?
It would depend on, it depends on the gun, it depends on what the needs are and what he's charging versus other people as well.
What is the DA's office seeking in terms of sentencing?
So this was an open plea at this point, so, and again, Mr. Palmer is handling this case, so I cannot comment on what he's going to be seeking as far as sentence. But he is facing multiple felony charges, so Mr. Palmer will have a lot of ability to ask for significant time.
Please allow me also to say this. In general, when we are pre-sentencing, we try to litigate that in the courtroom instead of saying something in advance. Some judges may perceive comments to the press as a form of improper pressure. So even though we certainly have an answer, it's more appropriate for us to do that in a courtroom. I totally understand the question, but I just want you to understand that we're not trying to avoid it. We're just trying to comport with how things should be handled in court. Anything else, Mr. Tomchuk? All right, and I understand Univision is here as well?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Krasner, I would like to ask, some people don't trust in the justice system because they say when they denounce someone, a few days later, the same people is released. So what is your message to them? Can you make it in Spanish?
En español. Okay. Este caso es un buen ejemplo de lo que va a pasar cuando personas cometen crímenes en cuanto a armas. El señor aquí que hemos arrestado no fue un miembro de esa ganga. Sin embargo, él dio las armas que miembros de O2-4 necesitaban para seguir disparando y matando a gente. Y este defendiente, el tipo que dio las armas a la ganga, va a pasar un buen periodo en la cárcel, un periodo que él merece. Quiero que entiendan, personas, que esta oficina está a su lado para protegerles en contra de personas que quieren vender armas de una moda ilegal. Does that work? Con mi pobre gringo español. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Es importante de las familias, de la gente en la comunidad, ayuda a la policía, porque la gente en la comunidad suffer.
Krasner, also, I'm asking for, if you have the response now, so I can take it later. I would like to know how many people was charged in 2024 and this 2025. You have that stats versus people sentenced.
When you, okay, let me understand the question, although I'll probably have to get you some data later, but the question is, how many people were charged with what? With illegal gun possession or with anything?
With it, in general.
Cualquier cosa?
Because, yeah.
Okay.
It's just to compare, how many people you charge with your office charge, and to see how many people really, is going to the jail because anything.
All right, well, maybe we can figure out the specifics of that to see what we can give you. We do have, as you know, a dashboard that is updated more or less every day that has a lot of information about these things. I can tell you that in most criminal justice systems, about 70% of all cases are misdemeanors, meaning they're lower level offenses. And obviously, you have a pretty low rate of people going to jail for low level offenses. And then you have another 30% that are felonies, some of them much more serious than others. Obviously a homicide is much more serious than a purse snatching. Don't get me wrong, purse snatching is terrible, but it's much more serious. So you will see a higher rate of people actually going to jail among the felony cases. But let's see if we can get a little bit more information. Dustin, maybe you can try to collect the questions, and we can get you some data around those points. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much.